Those games are tough to explain. Bork is good, but if you're too squishy to even be on their screens, you need Titanic. Yeah, so I've been studying with Logan Jungle streams and things like that. But like, so the question a lot of people ask is like Bork versus Titanic on Briar, right? Like, when do you go Bork? When do you go Titanic? There's a number of things to consider. Generally, Titanic is better. And so it's a thing of like, first question is like, will you be able to survive if you go Bork? In a lot of games, the answer is no. And then you should just go Titanic, right? So this game, Bork is really, really good versus tanks. So like Bork versus these three people would have been really nice. But because of how much CC they have, if I go Bork, a lot of those fights where I barely survived, I'm just dead. And then Jinx pops off and kills everybody. So it doesn't matter that I can kill the tank because I won't live long enough to do it, right? So that's one of the problems with Bork in a game like this. That said, in a game where you're less likely to have to frontline and just die all the time, then Bork's going to be a lot better. The other thing, and Logan, correct me if I'm wrong on this, the other thing that people don't seem to realize about Titanic, which is important, is Titanic is more burst. If your goal is to kill a squishy really fast, you actually want Titanic, you don't want Bork. Bork is about killing the tanks. Bork is like, they have a Mundo. How am I going to deal with that guy? Bork him. Bork is about, how do I deal with like a Mumu or Poppy? But if you're actually trying to kill like a Jinx or a Shaco, Titanic is better because it lets you burst them out by doing UW auto Q. Let's see, what is the combo? It's W auto Q, assuming you're close enough. W auto Q auto Titanic auto bite, right? And like you can like mix it up, but basically it lets you get like an insane amount of auto attacks off in a very, very, very short amount of time because the W gets in, the Titanic gives you an attack reset plus like the extra damage on it. So it's kind of a thing where it's like and like a game like this, that's actually really good versus say the Shaco, right? Because if I don't kill Shaco in the duration of my stun, he disappears, right? So there was a number of times that game where I was able actually to kill the Shaco player because I had the Bork, because not the Bork, the Titanic, because I managed to get that burst combo off before he disappeared. So, yeah. And so anyways, yeah, if you're playing Briar and you want to get better at her, my suggestion to think about is like, think about this specific item a lot more. It's pretty good, better than you'd expect, especially if you need to like frontline and stuff like that. Logan, what do you think about Briar's Eclipse build? I feel like Eclipse is good on Briar. Like you can actually like go look at her item win rates, and it's like it's up there. It's like yeah, it's like a good item. Like she has all these options, and they're all good, right? Like they're all pretty good. But like I don't really know when you'd want to build Eclipse. Like it's clearly not bad, so there's definitely games to build it. But I don't get why you would build it over Titanic. I'm not really sure of the difference. Yeah, I'm not aware. Against dueling champs, Lee, Viego, J4? Why don't you go like Bork? Is Bork just purely the tank option and then like Eclipse is for the 1v1s? Do you think that champions like Garen should be viable in Challenger? I'm generally the opinion that simpler champs should not. Yes, I think it's fine for them to be viable in Challenger. And I want to be clear, there's a big difference between the best thing you can play and viable. So that's something to consider. So to answer the Garen question, for starters, there's a difference between viable and the best thing you can play. If you were to tell me, should Garen be the best thing you can play in Challenger? I'd be like, that is maybe suspect. Similar to how like perhaps Yuumi or Malphite shouldn't be the best things you can play in Challenger. But I think it is totally fine for simpler characters to be viable at higher MMRs, as long as it doesn't come at a cost to their like average players. So like in regards to Garen, right? Garen's main player base, the main people who like him, are lower MMR players. And so like if you came in and told me, hey, you should change Garen to dominate Challenger, I'd be like, well, I'd rather not do that, specifically because like the people Garen is for aren't in Challenger in the way that like Lee Sin is a lot more for like say a Challenger player. So I think that's something to think about is like what MMR like contains that character's main audience, and you need to care about them, you need to think about them. In regards to game balance though, because I think this is where you're coming from with that question of like, hey, should simple characters be able to succeed? It is my belief that that's totally fine. Given that League of Legends is a game with lots and lots of different ways to express skill in the game, right? So as an example, let's say you're a Challenger top lane player. You could imagine a specific game where Malphite could be the perfect pick, right? Like imagine the enemy team, for whatever reason, picked a bunch of AD, and the enemy laner that you've got last pick, and the enemy top lane is like playing a weak laner for whatever reason or something. It's like it might just be that like Malphite is the perfect pick in that game, and so just because Malphite is like less mechanically intensive doesn't mean that he shouldn't have games in high MMR, especially where like he's still a good option that brings something to the table. Something to the table. Like that's a super valuable thing to think about. And yeah, and League is a game where it's like there's lots and lots of different ways to be skilled at it as well, and I think that's important to note. Is like you could be skilled at League of Legends in terms of being a challenger or master tier level player by being really, 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 really insane mechanically. And by the way, if you're a challenger player, you're insane mechanically. Like you can't get like you need mechanics to be challenger, right? But you could be insane at the game by being really skilled mechanically, or you could be insane at the game. Actually, a better way to say it. Let's say you have a 10 out of 10 rating on mechanics and an 8 out of 10 rating on macro, right? Like that's one way that potentially you could be one of the best in the game, right? Alternately, another way you could potentially be the best in the game is you have an 8 out of 10 rating on mechanics and a 10 out of 10 rating on macro, right? And like, oh, actually, you're even better than the average player in your MMR at reading the map and reading the situation and choosing your fights and knowing where to be and reading the enemy jungler and things like that, right? And I think that's something that makes League of Legends good, is that even all the way up to the highest level of play, there's lots and lots of different ways to be good at the game. And it's not just who has the most raw mechanical skill on a collie, and there's other potential things you could be inputting into the game to do that. And I think that's a good thing. It creates like a variety, right? Now, it's important then that like, hey, let's say you're playing a mechanically skilled character, like, you know, if you like mechanics and skill is the way you want to express the game, your output on the game, like mechanically skilled characters should be viable if you're really good at them, right? But similarly, I think it's reasonable to be like having a game that says, whoa, actually, this is a really, really good Malphite pick, and like, I'm going to like know when and where to be at all times, right? And that could be like a good pick for a certain game. So yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable for simpler characters to be better in higher MMRs. I think it is a bit more suspect if the simplest characters are the best thing you can pick in most situations. That's where I think that gets dangerous at the highest levels of play.